All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, you've had a pretty exciting start to your week this week. Can you tell me what you got up to on Tuesday night?
Yes, I was at St Helens for the premiere of their new film that looks at the way they won the World Club Challenge last year when they went over to Penrith and had that incredible 13-12 victory. And it's a film that Saints are going to show on their own website, I think from the 18th, Thursday the 18th, so in 7 days' time. And their fans will get the chance to see it, and I would certainly advise them to watch it because it's a really interesting film. And, I mean, it's taken quite a long time for St Helens to produce this film, when you bear in mind that, you know, they were there in, I think, February or March last year, weren't they? And but it sort of reflects the care that they've got a young lad, Josh Roberts, I think his name is, who is the video guy at St Helens, and he's put the thing together, and he's done a very, very good job indeed. And it deals with the whole thing sequentially, so that the film begins with St Helens the players getting up early in the morning to catch a coach to Manchester Airport, to then fly to to Sydney via Singapore and so on. And it, as I say, it takes you through the whole trip. They book into the Manly Pacific Hotel on Manly Beach, and they obviously had a really great time there, but soon get down to the serious business. And there are interviews as the film progresses with different players and coaching staff and so on, and it's really been impressively put together, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. How long does it go for, roughly?
An hour and a half, roughly.
Yeah, wow. So that's quite the production, and
yes.
As you said, if they've sort of taken their time, I'm sure it'll be a decent piece.
Oh, absolutely. You know, you get into the coaches' sessions with the team prior to the match. You're in, everywhere that you'd want to be as a fan, seeing how they're preparing. It's a real in-depth feature, and it's great. You know, the only slight problem with it when I saw it was that there was some of the captions were a bit dodgy. There were one or two dodgy spellings and dodgy grammar, but I think they're going to sort that out before before it goes onto their website. And on that basis, I'd give it 5 out of 5, and I have done. With the club, and I've said there in my review of it that the only disappointing thing for me was that it made me think, gosh, I wish I'd gone on that trip.
Yeah,
it would have been great. And it was great to see so many St Helens supporters there, particularly, of course, when that field goal went over from Lewis Dodd at Penrith. So, no, it's a great thing, and congratulations to St Helens for doing it. And I'd love to see that film picked up by Sky Sports or somebody like that to give it a wider distribution.
Yeah, and was it a packed cinema on the premiere?
Oh, yes, yeah. It was an invited audience. Obviously, most of the players were there. Most people connected with the club, the sponsors, presumably some of the season ticket holders and so on. But it was premiered in Cineworld in St Helens, and as I say, it was really well done, and I was very glad that I got invited. You got invited too, mate, but you were ill, weren't you?
Yes,
you had to drop out. So
unfortunately,
that was a bit unfortunate.
I had spent the night with a bit of a stomach bug and my head in the toilet bowl. Sort of.
Yeah, gosh.
I'm not sure.
Don't give us too much detail.
No. I don't want to discuss some of our viewers, but
no.
I was very dirty at myself. Sort of like about 24 hours, I guess you could say, after the premiere, I started to feel myself again. But I was bummed because, I mean, I've just heard your glowing review of it, and it just makes me, wish that I was there. But I think it's fantastic that they went and documented the whole journey. And
absolutely,
with these things, you're sort of taking a risk because obviously it's nice to document the journey, but the end goal is to get that win, and how much that could benefit the film if they do secure that victory.
Oh, gosh, yes. It wouldn't have been half as good if they'd not won that game.
That's right.
There's no doubt about it. It wouldn't have been as thrilling, would it?
And the way they won it in dramatic fashion.
Yeah. Well, everybody knew what the outcome was, of course, but that didn't stop people from applauding when that goal went over.
Yep. And it's also nice to have something like that documented with James Roby's sort of last go around, you know. So
James is such a great guy. I mean, I spoke to him after the event, and you know, he's such a lovely bloke. And again, what was quite interesting was that quite a number of the players, you know, were interviewed individually in the film. And it was interesting how eloquent some of them were. You know, they really spoke very, very well. Yeah, you know, Lewis Dodd, for example, is a very eloquent young guy, and you know, T. Ritson, he was, although he didn't play in the game, but you know, the way he spoke was really good, and the others, you know, they all did. James Roby, obviously, and no, it was good, and I felt really pleased to have been invited to see it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I believe we are being sent some screenshots or potentially
well, hopefully
some clips.
So. I don't know yet, but I've asked if they can do, and hopefully they will.
Anything else you'd like to touch on with the premiere, Martyn?
Well, no, I think that's just about it. As I say, it just made me think, well, if only I'd been over there with them, you know, and
on the northern beaches, that would have been nice.
It would have been, yeah. Well, I have been there before, but it is nice. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
It's one of the nicest parts of the world, I would say.
Yeah.
Those northern beaches in Sydney, but you know, sadly we can't all be there, can we? But you know, absolutely. I had a job to do here, so that was what I had to do. But no, as I say, I just recommend to any Saints fan. To watch the film, and to any other fan as well. I mean, it was a triumph, not just for St Helens in a way, but also for British Rugby League. I think you know, they were hoisting the banner for our competition, and they did it incredibly successfully. And you could see how. I mean, it's very interesting to watch Paul Wellens. You know, before the game, giving his pre-match talk, he actually did make the point that you know, if this game goes to Golden Point, don't worry, because we'll win it. You know, we'll last the pace better than they will, and they won't. They don't know what's going to hit them, sort of thing. It was really quite inspiring stuff, and you know, great coaching by Paul Wellens, in my view. So it, you know, as I say, it was good to watch.
Yeah, it's amazing, just some of those, you know, little mental things, that mindset.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
You know, it can always come into play late in the match. That's for sure. But yeah. What a outstanding achievement from the Saints, and what a production. I'm sure you know, maybe Wigan will be looking over thinking, hey, maybe we should do something like that for...
Yes, although of course they're not travelling to Australia, so it wouldn't be, you know, it won't be quite the same thing, but I'm sure they will record the game, but the key thing is to win it. And of course, the great thing about Wigan is they've sold more than 20,000 tickets now for that game. It will be a sellout probably on February the 24th, and I think that's going to be a great event, and obviously I imagine you'll be there, and hopefully I'll be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll all have a wonderful night, and hopefully culminating with a Wigan win. I actually asked Paul Wellens after the film on Tuesday night, would he like to sort of say that as the St Helens coach, that he'd like to see Wigan win against Penrith, and he said, well, I'm hoping for a great game. Yeah. No St Helens coach would ever say, I'd like to see Wigan win, I don't think. It was very, very sort of guarded in his comments. I think he understood why I was trying to place him in a dilemma there. To you know, any Saints coach praising Wigan would probably
he'd be crucified by the Saints fans.
He might be, yes.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
That's funny. I'm sort of in a bit of a dilemma myself. Obviously, coming from Australia, I'll probably want to see NRL teams do well, but the Panthers beat my Broncos in the grand final, so I'm leaning towards Wigan, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, you're here now, mate. You're an honorary Englishman.
That's right. All right, we'll move on to some other news that's happened over the past week or so. The RFL has recently announced that they're going to relax the visa rules for overseas players, and I think one of those rule changes will be any players, say, in Australia that have played Queensland Cup or New South Wales Cup under the age of 24, they'll be eligible to get a visa pretty easily to come over here and play.
Yes.
What's your initial reactions to this news, Martyn?
Well, it's starting to happen already, isn't it? With Wakefield Trinity, for example, being very strongly linked with a young man called Isaiah Vangenaar, who is the son of the great Joe Vangenaar, who played with Bradford Bulls for several years. I mean, obviously, if he was as good as his dad, that would be a great signing, you know, but that would perhaps be expecting a lot. I'm really not sure about this. You know, we need to develop our own talent, not keep drawing on Australian talent, in my opinion. And I think it's I've got mixed feelings about it, because I can see that it does give another option for clubs over here. And of course, what we're finding now is that British clubs are not able to sign the top Australian talent, because the financial disparity between the two competitions is so great now. So it seems that we're going to focus on seeing whether our clubs can attract talent that's up and coming, I suppose you might say. And we'll have to see how it works, but I'm not a great fan of it. But the thing is, the English clubs have got 7 overseas quota places, and that will remain. So clubs can only sign these players unless, of course, they've got a right to a British passport. But if they haven't, then they will count on the overseas quota. So it shouldn't increase the number of overseas players in total coming over here.
Yeah, interesting. It'll, it's. I think that some of the, I guess, the explanation for why they changed that rule, I think they were saying that it'll combat Australian clubs poaching English talent.
Well,
but then it's sort of, as you said, are you developing your own players? Then that's a bit of a worry.
Well, some of our young players, will head over to Australia. There was an interesting interview in one newspaper this week with young Will Price, who's gone to Newcastle Knights, and he's been talking in glowing terms about what he's found over there. He's more or less living on the beach in Newcastle, and he was talking about trying to break into the match day squad there, and the competition he's got to do it, and so on. And he's talking about the quality of coaching and the training facilities and so on, which he's sort of comparing very favourably with what happens in this country. I'm not too surprised about that, and it does make it sound like a real great experience.
Yeah,
and I can only imagine that other young players reading that would probably want to go and do the same thing, if we're honest about it. And certainly, if I were a young player, 21 years old, I'd be looking very hard at trying to find a playing career in the NRL for at least a few years anyway.
And it's always nice if they can take what they've learned there and bring it back to either their old club or a new club in the Super League.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, experiences like that will make you a better mentor later in your career as well. So.
Well, Luke Thompson will be back at Wigan, of course, this year, after having spent a few years with mixed success, actually, at Canterbury Bulldogs, because, of course, he suffered a few injuries, and that was a real setback for him, and they released him, and I think he wanted to stay in Australia ideally, but Wigan obviously made him a better offer. And Luke, you've got to remember that Luke was the man of the match in the 2019 Grand Final. He won the Harry Sunderland Trophy that year. So, I think that was that sort of shows his quality, doesn't it? And that's obviously what Wigan are banking on in signing him for this year. And I think Luke, I would imagine, would want to have a really great game against the Panthers when they come, because I suspect he probably believes that his NRL career isn't over yet, and might want to go back there after spending time at Wigan. Yeah,
and he was extremely unlucky with not only injury but timing as well. So he went, right as COVID sort of happened.
Gosh!
I think his first season he had a pretty good year, but unfortunately injuries have stopped him since that first year.
And things have been chaotic at Canterbury, haven't they? For a few years now, and it's a bit like a tanker on the sea, isn't it? It takes a long time to turn it round, and you can't just do it in one short, sharp shock, really, I don't suppose. And so maybe he chose the wrong club, and certainly had bad luck with injuries. But let's hope that now that he's back over here, he really has a great season with Wigan.
No, absolutely. Now, we've also had some rumours circulating this week. It's being reported that the BBC is set to broadcast some free-to-air matches this year, Martyn. Now, nothing's been
well, I can say, official. As we speak, the contract hasn't been signed, I'm told, on good authority, although it's likely to be signed. So one or two people have sort of jumped the gun a bit by saying it has been agreed. But until the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, it's unwise to automatically assume that the deal is in place. I mean, it's probably 90% likely to be in place. But yes, I mean, again, I'm not sure. It looks as though they might sign up for about 12 games, I think, including some playoff games. And those games will probably be shown on Saturday evening, probably kicking off at 6:30, something like that, I think, although that has yet to be confirmed, of course. But I think if that's true, I mean, a lot of people really enjoyed the Channel 4 coverage, including me. I thought Channel 4 did a really good job on their coverage of the game. But if the BBC are now stepping in instead of them, the good thing about the BBC is it's got great reach, hasn't it? You know, more people are likely to watch the BBC than watch Channel 4 by and large. And kicking off at that time, the Channel 4 games generally kicked off in the very early afternoon, 12:30, 1 o'clock, that sort of time, which I thought was a great time. But I think an evening audience will probably be bigger, I would have thought. So we'll see how that goes. But it's going to be quite exciting. And I think the BBC's coverage will include the World Club Challenge as well, as I understand it, if that's part of the deal. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes, Jake. And we'll see what sort of job they do. I mean, it's going to be very. I mean, I think Mark Chapman, for example, on the BBC is one of the best presenters I've seen, and if he is involved, I think it'll be great. I'm not sure whether he would be involved in this on a weekly basis, but then there's Tanya Arnold, who's also very good. So I think the BBC, you know, would be in good hands. We'll see who they select as their commentary team and their pundits and so on. But hopefully, it's going to be a real, you know, good experience for them and for the game.
I believe I read somewhere they're set to extend their Challenge Cup rights as well for a couple
they
more years.
might do. One of the things I'm told is that if they were going to keep the Challenge Cup but not Super League games, they weren't sure about whether to renew that contract or not, you know. But it seems that by throwing Super League games into the mix, that makes it much more likely that they'll, you know, have both competitions this year, which I think is obviously great for the game. And you know, as I say, let's see whether we can find a way to build the audience, because that's the key thing, isn't it? That we need to do is to get more people interested. We've seen recently with darts how darts has sort of shot up to the top of the hit parade because of this young fellow, you know, who 16-year-old kid doing brilliantly, coming from Warrington, of course, and just generally the whole nation taking an interest in you know, his progress to the final.
He's a mad Wolves fan too, I think.
He
is.
Nice.
Yeah,
he's a Wolves fan, and he said he's going to be back on the terraces when the season starts, which I think he'll be surrounded by quite a few people seeking his autograph. But seems a great young guy. But we need to get rugby league players up at maybe not right at that level. That would be difficult, but at a much higher level than they are at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's any opportunity to get rugby league on you know, free to air channels, or
absolutely,
you know, we should
on any
take
channels whatsoever, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've also had a bit of player movement over the last week or so. Jordan Abdull has signed on with Helens Dragons, effective immediately. Bit of a surprise, this one, Martyn.
Yes, I was surprised at that. I mean, you've got to hand it to Willie Peters. He's very decisive, isn't he, on who he retains and who he lets go. I mean, he let Rowan Milnes go to Castleford a few months ago, and now he's allowing Jordan Abdull to go to Catalans, and you know, without Catalans having to pay a fee for him, you know, simply taking over his contract, I assume. I mean, Jordan Abdull is a very intelligent player. He's got a superb kicking game. He's very much an organiser on the field. Is Jordan, but the problem that he had last year was that he was injured fairly early in the season. Only played 14 games, I think, in total for Hull KR. And, of course, they brought over Brad Schneider, who played in all the big games towards the end of the year. And, they've got Tyrone May coming, of course, next year, who will probably be the playmaker for them, I would imagine, who's also a very good player. So very clearly, they thought they could let Jordan go, and Jordan will combine presumably with Theo Farge at the Catalans, which looks a potentially very exciting halfback combination, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I very much look forward to seeing how that unfolds.
Especially given that they've, they're losing May and they've lost Pearce, obviously, to retirement. So, brand new halves combination there for Catalans.
Absolutely, yes.
Which will be interesting to watch. It's interesting to see. Obviously, Willie Peters is building himself. I guess it's the squad he wants.
Oh, yes. As I say, give him credit for certainly being decisive and, putting his own neck on the line in a way. And, but his performance last year suggests that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, another surprising move we've seen over the last week or so is Joe Burgess. He's been released by Salford. He's
snapped up by Hull KR.
Yeah, signed by Hull KR as well. Another Willie Peters move. So, there hasn't been many details released about this one, Martyn.
No, they've got... Joe Burgess tends to play on the left wing, and they've got Ryan Hall there, of course. Now, Ryan Hall is only 7 points behind the all-time leading try scorer in Super League, which is Danny Maguire, who was Willie Peters' assistant last year. It's interesting. Obviously Ryan is in the latter stages of his career now, and Joe Burgess maybe is a longer-term investment, perhaps. I've always rated Joe Burgess ever since he burst through. I think we had him as our Rookie of the Year one year, and he's always looked a really good, big, strong winger to me. Yeah. I don't think his pace is quite as good as it used to be, but he's still a very effective player. Yeah, I think, and has been for Salford, and I think Salford will miss him.
No, absolutely, and another experienced outside back there for the Hull KR squad. I'm sure it'll do them wonders in terms of the juniors they're bringing through the system.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Now we've also had news. Sam Cassiano has been released by the Warrington Wolves. This one came as a bit of a surprise to me, and you as well.
Not too surprising, because he'd been given a very low squad number, and that always spells trouble, doesn't it? Yeah, he obviously wasn't in the top 13, not even the top 20 or 25. So sometimes when that happens, it shows that you're on the outer, really.
Right.
And Sam Burgess, Sam Burgess clearly doesn't rate him all that highly. That's what we've got to conclude, isn't it? And he prefers to get somebody else in who's got a higher work rate. The thing about Sam is that he doesn't play big minutes. He's a big guy and he causes problems when he comes on the field, but he doesn't play big minutes. And he's also, I think he's 33 now, so he's getting to the back stages of his career. Whether anybody else will sign him or not remains to be seen. At this moment, we don't know where he is going. Yeah. Maybe that will be sorted out very, very soon. Who knows? But, as I say, it didn't surprise me at all, really. And Sam, I think, will now be looking for a replacement who can play much bigger minutes than Sam did.
Yeah, because I suppose he's probably getting on in age a little bit as well. So
yes, he is.
If another club doesn't pick him up, it could be back home or maybe retirement.
Could be, yes, who knows? But he's had a good career so far, hasn't he?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, we had a question in the readers' poll this week, Martyn, that you wanted to get into. Was that what coaches are on the hot seat this year, or
which
under the most pressure?
I can just see this. Yes, the readers' poll this week. Which coach is under the most pressure in 2024? And we've given people 6 choices. Sam Burgess, obviously. Craig Lingard at Castleford. Darryl Powell at Wakefield Trinity. Ian Watson at Huddersfield Giants. Rowan Smith at Leeds Rhinos. And Tony Smith at Hull FC. Yeah. They're all under pressure for different reasons. Obviously, Sam, because it's his first head coaching gig, and, he comes with an enormous reputation as a player and great charisma. But can he actually produce a winning side for Warrington when others have failed, including Darryl Powell? We've then got Craig Lingard at Castleford. Now, Craig is a guy who I really rate very highly. Did a wonderful job with Batley. He's got a fairly limited squad at Castleford, and, as some people say, any position higher than 11th will probably be quite good for Castleford this year. Yeah. But I'm quite sure that Craig will have much greater ambition than that. But he will be under a lot of pressure to, he speaks really well about the game, but he needs to turn words into results. Yep. So that Castleford don't want to be, lingering at the bottom of the table again. Yep. Darryl Powell obviously had 2 bad years at Warrington, and his job this year is quite simple, is to win everything with Wakefield Trinity. Yeah. Go through the season without losing a game, perhaps. Well, that's pressure, isn't it? Yeah. Really, that's pressure. He's got to show that, what happened at Warrington wasn't a genuine reflection of his coaching ability. Yep. Then we've got Ian Watson at Huddersfield Giants, who got them to the Challenge Cup final in 2022, but then had a very disappointing 2023 and can't really afford another year like that at the Giants. So I think he's under great pressure. And you can say the same thing about Rowan Smith. Rowan came in the latter part of 2022, actually got Leeds to the grand final that year against St Helens. But in 2023, they only came 8th, and that really wasn't good enough for a team as big as Leeds. So he's got to find a way to get them into the top 6 as well. Yeah. And then finally, Tony Smith, much to say the 2 Smiths, uncle and nephew. Tony didn't have a great year last year. They finished 10th, in fact. Yeah. And it's essential that they do better than that. And it's a fantastic start to the season for them, isn't it? Hosting Hull KR in the Hull Derby on the opening night of the season. That's a real great way to open the season. But how good would it be for Hull FC fans, and Tony, of course, to get a win in that game? I mean, they'll all say, well, one game doesn't make a season, but actually, in this case, it might do. Yeah. Because it's so important. Last year, don't forget that when Hull hosted Hull KR at the MKM Stadium, Hull KR won 40 points to 0. Yep. Now that just can't happen again. No, absolutely. It just cannot happen again. And just like, even if it's a narrow victory, that can just release so much pressure. Golden Point win will be good enough. Yeah. Golden. In fact, that would be ideal because that would mean it was a really exciting game. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've mentioned this in previous episodes, that first win can really set the tone for it does.
The
Always
season,
does.
The next 5 games.
If you get an unexpected win in the first game, you're on the road to success, aren't you? And in the NRL last year, Brisbane travelled to Penrith and got a 1-point win very early in the season, didn't they? And that set them up for a great year. And what it is it's a reward for the tough and grueling pre-season you've all been through as a group. Absolutely. And to come up short in round 1, it probably makes you question: did we do enough? Did we prepare correctly? So But if you had to vote, Martyn, who would you be picking? It's a tough one, but the one under most pressure. Yeah. Oh, gosh, that's an interesting one because I think I would tend to say Rowan Smith probably at Leeds. Although the pressure. Once the season starts, the pressure either increases because you're losing matches or it decreases because you're winning them. Yeah. So, if we ask the same question a month or 2 into the season, we might have a different list of coaches because if Warrington have won all their first 4 or 5 games, the pressure will fall away on Sam. And the same's true of all the other guys. So it's a fascinating one. It varies from week to week. And with how big Leeds are as a club, I think it's like a blessing and a curse almost if you're a coach. Oh yes, yeah. Compared to say if you're Castleford. So, interesting to see how that changes throughout the first 5 weeks. Absolutely, fingers crossed they can all get a few wins under their belt because we never like seeing coaches or anyone get sacked in our sport. No, nobody wants to see anybody get sacked. But, as I say, that's the readers' poll that's on our website, totalrl.com, if you want to vote in that poll. And I'm not sure. I've not checked who's who's getting the most votes so far, but we'll see.
Be pretty even results, I'd imagine.
I'd have thought
it's
so.
Such a tough one to pick.
Yeah.
Now, we've had some news. Oh, it's old news now, but it's official. Jerome Luai has been locked in. He's going to sign with the Tigers, or he has signed with the Tigers for the next 5 years.
From 2025.
Yeah, from 2025. I just want to ask you, Martyn, what impact do you think his signing will have on that Tiger squad? Obviously, they've been through so much over the past few years. They've they've wiped out their board, and they're making all these changes. Benji Marshall's the coach now. Do you think it's on the up now for the Tigers?
Well, it can't be anything else, can it? It's got to be, because they've been at the bottom for such a long time. There's only one way to go, in the same way that Penrith can only go down, given where they are. So Jerome Luai, I mean, what's important for the Tigers, I suppose, is that when Jerome Luai does join them next year, he's had an injury-free run in 2024. The worst thing would be if he got a serious injury and then couldn't start the season next year with the Tigers. But it's a strange thing, isn't it? In Australia, you have this rule whereby after the 1st of November, players can start negotiating a contract not for the following year, but for the year after that. Whereas for us, it's first of you can't negotiate until after the 1st of May. So you've got a very strange situation where Jerome Luai is playing for the Panthers in 2024, knowing that it'll be his last season there. And I suppose the good thing about that, though, is that at least he knows what his future is going to be. So, unlike in this country where he might be player might be negotiating during the course of the season, which must be a distraction when you think about it.
Yeah.
So in many respects, I think it's a good rule that you've got in Australia.
It's got many pros and cons, that's for sure. And I think a good example from recent history is when Cam Munster's contract was coming to an end, or that November 1 date was coming up for Cam Munster. All the talk in the media was, where's he going to sign, where's he going to sign? Knowing that he still has another full year on his contract with the Melbourne Storm, but it almost came a bit of a distraction off the field because
absolutely,
all the players were being asked in press conferences, what's Cam going to do? And that sort of takes the shine away from what you're doing on the field.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
It's an interesting one because let's just say Penrith have a bad start to the season and Jerome Luai is playing poorly. The media are going to start asking questions about, is his mind elsewhere? Is he thinking about the Tigers?
Yeah, they will, but that's a big if, isn't it? Who knows what's going to happen? But I think Luai is probably a very professional guy who, now that his future is secured, I think he's got the green light to have a really good season in 2024. And he'll want to do that because he'll want to go out on a high with Penrith. There's no doubt about it. And hopefully with Samoa at the end of the season.
Yeah.
That's another thing that's not been sorted out yet. The Samoa tour is still going through the hoops, so to speak. We don't know whether it's going to take place or not. We all hope it will, of course, but we need to get it sorted out soon. And Jerome Luai would be a major part of that.
No, absolutely. Now, we have some Challenge Cup football games kicking off this weekend, I believe. You've got the draw there, Martyn?
Not the draw. Well, I've not got the draw for the challenge for the men's Challenge Cup, but you're right. It does start this week, and there are 3 games that you can actually watch online this weekend. The BBC is screening the game between the Royal Air Force and the Navy, which has been played in Lincolnshire, RAF Coningsby, I think it is, in Lincolnshire. There's also a game between the Army and Fryston from Castleford, and that is being shown on Forces TV, I believe, on YouTube. So if you want to watch the Army playing Fryston, you can see it on YouTube. And then on Sunday, I think it's Oral St James, is it, versus Innsrose Bridge being played on Sunday, and that's being shown on the Sportsman website. So you do get the chance to see some rugby, Jake, and I think there are 10 games altogether in the Challenge Cup this weekend.
Yep.
And then the second round is 2 weeks further down the track. So in a strange way, this weekend is the start of the season, really. in a low-key sort of a way, I suppose. But nonetheless, when the Challenge Cup gets going, that's when the season officially starts, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll just be great to have some football back on our screens.
No doubt about it.
We've got the internet, access to the internet these days.
Absolutely,
so it's made it a little bit easier
so
for us.
We can all see more than one of those games. I'm not quite sure whether the two Saturday games kick off at the same time, but we'll see. But it's going to be really exciting.
And if you were to make your early predictions for the Challenge Cup final this year, I know it's quite a long way away to go. Who would your early picks be?
Well, I mean, most people think Wigan are going to have a good year all round this year. So, I can't see any reason for disagreeing with that point of view. But I think St Helens obviously will think quite differently, as will plenty of other teams, and maybe if Warrington are going to have a good year this year, the Challenge Cup could be the thing that they go for too. So it's going to be quite exciting. I'm really looking forward to it, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, was there a Lee Leopards season preview in this week's edition?
With Adrian Lamb, and I've got to say we've got Adrian there on the front page, and that's a really cheerful picture of Adrian.
Yep.
And not surprisingly, he looks very happy. And after last season, who can blame him? We didn't put him in our list of coaches under pressure this year because I don't think he is.
No,
I think he's very safe at Lee. The only thing that could affect him, I suppose, is if he has another good year, he's likely to be under the microscope of a few NRL clubs. If they start sacking coaches over there, then Adrian might be somebody who, might be approached, as of course might his son Lachlan.
Yeah.
Because, there's a shortage of really good halfbacks all over the world in Rugby League at the moment, but Lachlan certainly falls into that category. And if an NRL club is looking for a good halfback, then they might look Lachlan's way, I would have thought. And interestingly, St George, they've just they had signed Ronald Volkman from the Warriors, but I don't know if you've seen that news that they've discovered he's got a shoulder injury, so they're not going to go through with that contract. So they may be looking around for somebody else.
Yeah. The interesting thing about that Ronald Volkman situation is he was at the Warriors and then requested a release to sign that contract. Now, he still had 2 years left on his deal with the Warriors.
Yes.
So now the question is, do the Warriors then have to take him back and honour those 2 years? Or
well, I would think they probably would because, you can request a release from a contract, but until you sign a new contract, that contract still prevails.
True.
So I would imagine that he would return to the Warriors. But of course, that would affect their planning, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Under the salary cap and so on.
Well, that's it. They could have made signings of other players with his money, so it's a bit of a headache.
It is.
Hopefully he can get that, I think it was a shoulder injury sorted. But yeah, is there anything else you want to touch on?
Well, two things. First of all, the Women's Challenge Cup, the draw was made for that last night. And interestingly enough, there are 16 teams involved. They're split into 4 groups of 4, with the top 2 teams from each group going through to the quarterfinals, and then it being played on a knockout basis with the final at Wembley on June the 8th. So there are 1 or 2 new teams coming into the competition this year. Sheffield Eagles are in Group 1 alongside Castleford, Featherstone and York. Then you've got some interesting looking groups actually. St Helens, who hold the trophy, they're in the same group as London Broncos, Bradford Bulls and Warrington Wolves. So that will be an interesting group, I think. Women's Rugby League is really going strong, isn't it, at the moment, on both sides of the world. So absolutely wonderful to see. And the more competition we can get for the big guns, of course, which are St Helens, York and Leeds and perhaps Wigan, the better it'll be.
No, absolutely. And hopefully with what we're seeing in the NRLW and the growth it's experienced, we can keep seeing that growth over here as well, and make it a viable option for young athletes to see rugby league as a potential to have a professional career in. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Well, I wonder whether we're going to get to the stage where we see a World Club Challenge in women's rugby league as well as in men's.
I'd hope so.
That'd be an interesting one, wouldn't it?
Because I mean, like, you see some of the English players that are going over to play in the NRLW now. There's no doubt that they can mix it with those girls. So yeah, I think one day I'm sure it'll be on the list, and we'll be seeing double headers for the World Club Challenge. That'd be awesome. But yeah, hopefully in the next few years we see something like that. But if you're happy to wrap up here, Martyn.
Just one final thing. I did notice today a really interesting piece in the Daily Mail, or Mail Online, I should say, about Reece Walsh, the great Brisbane Broncos player, one of your favourites, no doubt, who's put
many other girls' favourites as well.
Yeah, well, of course.
He's a good-looking fella.
Well, this is what I was just going to say. we talked a bit earlier about raising the profile of individual rugby league players. Well, Reece has got a 2-year-old little daughter, and he's put a video of himself on Instagram with his little daughter, and he's obviously besotted with her, clearly. Yeah. And it's a wonderful video that I'd recommend anybody watch. And it's got thousands and thousands of views with people, saying wonderful things about it. And, that's the sort of thing. It's just great to see a different side of a player. We see them on the field, but actually, at heart, when they're at home with the kids, most rugby league players that I know, and Reece clearly falls into this category, they're just big softies, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just great to see. He's such a marketable guy, is Reece Walsh. Yep. I think he's the most marketable guy in World Rugby League at the moment, and it was just marvellous to see.
That's it, because you don't often associate, affection and love and care with rugby league players, do you? It's always rough.
Not on the field, anyway.
and that's the thing. What you see on the field is not, what you get off the field. Yeah. It's always funny when you see some of the big, rough and tough, players with a bit of mongrel in them, you might say, go off the field and pick up their daughters and just like, you're just a big softy, aren't you?
Yeah.
But I'll have to have a look at that one. That's really funny.
Oh, great. Yeah.
The other interesting thing that's been happening a bit in Australia at the moment is photographers chasing Nathan Cleary around with his new love, Mary Fowler. Have you heard about this?
Oh, well, I know he's linked with her, the Australian football player, isn't she? She's a very good player, apparently, and they're very closely linked romantically. So, no, I mean, I've not kept tabs on them being chased around, but I'm not that surprised by it.
Oh yeah, it's they've had a few photos and videos of them taking, kicking the ball around in parks. It's almost like they've been, followed by the paparazzi. So a bit of a power couple there in Australia, which is funny.
Well, I mean, who knows? You never know how long relationships will last. But if they did become a long-term partnership and had children, God, they'd be good sportsmen or women, wouldn't they? You would imagine.
Right. I'd hate to have kids going up against them in athletics, that's for sure. All right, mate. Well, we might wrap it up here. Don't forget, guys, if you do want to get your subscription to League Express, head along to www.totalrl.com/shop. You can get your online subscriptions there. We might wrap it up here, Martyn.
I think
thanks again, mate.
And it's a pleasure to see you back looking reasonly well.
Hopefully there'll be no more toilet bowl visits in the next week or so. I think I'm in the clear now, which is great. We'll do it all again next week.
Great stuff, mate. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Martyn. Cheers.